What if you are actually just keeping the emotional dynamic of your traumatizing childhood alive into your adulthood simply because it is comfortable and familiar? It's wild to think that there are actual long term risks that come with unhealthy patterns from repetition compulsion, right? Let's dive into repetition compulsion before I dive further into this video so that it's more understandable what this all means, right? In Freudian psychology, repetition compulsion is the reference to the emotional childhood dynamic of trauma that took place that ends up being repeated in adulthood. I believe that it is both subconsciously and unconsciously repeated. In other words, you're really not aware of the fact that you're doing it. So, what does this look like in adulthood, right? For instance, if what you experienced in childhood was just dysfunctional and unhealthy and toxic dynamics in terms of relationships, you are going to recreate that into adulthood, right? So, say for instance, if you watched your parents fight, you're going to think that's just the way that relationships are supposed to be. It's not healthy, you know, um, but you're going to recreate that into adulthood. And that's just the reality of it, right? Repetition compulsion is a fascinating thing because I would say that it's not just for unhealthy childhoods, it's just the way that we operate, right? So if you had a healthier childhood where you were not raised in an environment of survival, you just repeated patterns of healthy dynamics into adulthood. The time that it becomes problematic and really just an issue in terms of your overall health is when it was unhealthy dynamics that you learned and unhealthy dynamics that you recreated later on into adulthood, right? So let me just make this very clear if this hasn't been made clear already. Repetition compulsion is the act of compulsively, basically meaning, subconsciously, unconsciously, just doing it because it's habitual. It's a pattern, right? uh, Compulsively repeating comfortable and familiar emotional dynamics from an exceedingly traumatizing childhood, right? So it's very important to understand that first and foremost, to get that out of the way so you understand what it is that repetition compulsion actually is, right? So if you find yourself in dysfunctional and unhealthy relationships in adulthood, and you're unaware of the dynamic and of what is actually taking place there, there's a good chance that you're just repeating your traumatizing childhood, right? You experienced dynamics that were unhealthy in childhood, and you are just subconsciously and unconsciously recreating that in adulthood. It doesn't mean that it's what you actually want, it is what your nervous system is used to because you were raised in an environment of dysregulation, right? You were raised by individuals who their nervous systems were dysregulated, and you learned to tune and attune your nervous system to theirs. And that's where the dysfunctionality and the dysregulation, the turbulence, and all of that fucked up shit came into place, right? That's the reality of that. The fascinating thing about all of this, and I will get into the long term risks, right? Um, because it's absolutely fascinating, right? But think about it this way: as an adult, you are basically allowing the little you to drive the vehicle through your life, to make all of the decisions, your relationships and everything, right? The relationships that you hold, what are they like? What is the nature, or what are the many natures of the relationships that you hold? Are they dysfunctional? Are they fucked up? Are they unhealthy? Are they toxic? Right? What did your childhood look like? You don't have to answer. I mean, this is more so just a matter of understanding what repetition compulsion is, the fact that we are compulsively repeating patterns from the comfortable and familiar dynamic of the traumatizing childhood. We're keeping that alive in adulthood. That's the reality of it, right? And the adult you is letting the little you, it's not good or bad or right or wrong, but I will get into the long term risk, right? The adult you is letting the little you drive the fucking vehicle, right? And you're basically just all over the fucking place, like fucking crashing left and right, right? Speeding off, fucking halting, this, that, and the other. It's very much back and forth and fucked up and all over the fucking place, right? That's the result of a dysregulated nervous system that learned dysregulation from dysregulation in an exceedingly unhealthy, fucked up, toxic, and dysfunctional family system in childhood. That's the reality of it, right? So, just so that it's made clear, subconsciously and unconsciously, because you're not aware of it, it's just comfort and familiarity. It's repetition, compulsion. It is habitual through years and years of autopilot, of unconscious and subconscious hardwired conditioning, right? The little you is at the wheel and it's basically like just making all these fucking decisions, doing all these things based in the comfort and familiarity of the childhood, the traumatized, exceedingly traumatized childhood, right? We all come out of childhood with wounds, right? We all have some level of trauma. That's just the reality of it, right? But there is such thing as more trauma, doesn't make you good or bad or right or wrong, and there's such thing as less trauma, doesn't make you good or bad or right or wrong. That's just the reality of it, right? Some of us had healthier childhoods, while some of us were raised in environments that exceeded fucked up survival, right? But the reality of it is that the adult you lets the little you drive the vehicle and crash into a bunch of fucking things and make all of these decisions because it's comfortable and familiar. You're just trying to recreate the stressful environment within yourself, right? The little you that was raised in the fucked up survival didn't get the peace, it didn't get the stillness, it didn't get the space to be yourself. No, it got the dysregulation and it learned to tune to that and therefore with that recreate that in adulthood. I hope this makes sense, right? So the little you has been driving the fucking vehicle this entire time. I literally think of something from like, I don't know, like Cartoon Network of um, the Wild Thornberries. I think that that's a decent reference for this. There's a little dude in Wild Thornberries that's just like absolutely crazy. Like the dude is like on coke or something like that, and he's just like all over the place. He's right that like the adult you, the higher you, is letting the little you drive the fucking vehicle because it's comfortable and familiar, right? The emotional dynamic, the dysregulation is comfortable and familiar. Healthy in that sense, emotional regulation, a regulated nervous system is boring to many people that were raised in these fucked up, dysfunctional, toxic, and unhealthy environments in childhood. Which is why the little you, the little Tasmanian fucking is driving the fucking vehicle. That's the reality of it, right? But the reality, the even more important reality beyond all of this, I mean, it's all important, but really understanding the long term macro, the trajectory of this is super important, super crucial. Um, so if you do not do the work to actually heal yourself, heal the wounds from childhood, and grow and evolve, develop, and uh, ground into um, a regulated nervous system. A life of peace, of stillness, of calm. Right there are long term risks that come with just continuing the repetition compulsion of unhealthy patterns. Right. First and foremost, let's just look at the reality of it that dysregulation is not healthy. A dysregulated nervous system is an unhealthy nervous system, and the likelihood that you will actually develop a a biological illness, right, a physical illness, if you carry out a dysregulated nervous system for years and years into adulthood and even into old age, right? Um, the likelihood that you will develop a physical illness is very high, right? Um, I'm not a doctor in that area, but I am talking about stuff that's real, right? Um, I mean, I'm not a doctor. I'm a cognitive behavioral and spiritual life coach, but I know what I'm talking about. Um, this is Freudian psychology. This is you recreating your childhood in adulthood that was fucked up and attracting individuals that were that are a mirror to what was modeled for you, and it's just the same fucking thing, right? Relationships that are healthy are not stressful. Relationships that are unhealthy are stressful. Relationships that are unhealthy and that are stressful over the long term are far more likely to lead you to serious physical health ailments and implications. That's just the reality of it. But you need to understand that you've been allowing, both subconsciously and unconsciously, compulsively, the little you to drive this vehicle and to be fucking crazy about it. Right? And it's really important to understand how this works, because if you don't catch it, you're just going to continue doing the same fucking thing over and over again, exhausting yourself and leading yourself to become sick. The first illness is emotional, right? The emotional illness leads to the physical illness, right? The emotional illness is the attraction to the unhealthy dynamics, which is what people that were raised in exceedingly fucked up childhoods with exceedingly fucked up trauma experienced and led to, right? And so continuing to choose that path is what leads to not only the continuation of the emotional illness, right? The mental illness and the repetition compulsion based in that, but also what happens to anybody's body in a consistent state of stress that like exceed like I don't believe that any level of stress is healthy. And when I say that, I'm referring to, the unnecessary stress. I'm not talking about eustress or anything like that. I'm talking about the unnecessary stress that many people recreate because of their comfortable and familiar childhood emotional dynamics, right? The effects of long go watch Joe Dispenza. He's talking about the same fucking thing that I am. He's talking about how um, the body in long-term stress leads to illness. That's just the way that it is. And I'm referring specifically to physical illness, right? Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. Disease, whatever it is, right? The body starts to shut down when it is exposed to long-term stress and it reacts physically. These are the long-term risks of continuing unhealthy patterns of repetition compulsion, and it's very important to understand that. Now, let me just break something down real quick before I end off this video, because it needs to be made crystal fucking clear. It is not normal or healthy or natural to be in a relationship over the long term that is stressful. I understand that a lot of people, including myself, were raised to believe that, oh yeah, that's just the way that relationships are. That's the way that unhealthy relationships are. Yeah, let's clearly define these right here. The unhealthy relationship leads to exceedingly fucked up stress, and with that, physical illness over the course of the long term. Healthy relationships are fucking peaceful as hell. They really are. And that's the difference. So it's not just that, oh, that's just the way that relationships are. They're supposed to be stressful, this, that, and the other. You're supposed to go through all these ups and downs. No. That's the way that unhealthy, dysregulated relationships work. I was going to say something else, but I decided not to. Healthy relationships are not that way. Healthy relationships are regulated. They are peaceful. They are fucking lovely. And that's just the way that it is. So I hope that this is made understandable, and I hope that the little you is going to continue to drive the fucking vehicle until you realize, wait a second, none of this shit is normal. None of this shit is natural. Fuck, I need to do something about this, right? This consistent state of stress that I find myself living in is not fucking normal, and it's actually going to lead to long-term physical illness, right? That's the way that it works. There is serious long-term risk of unhealthy repetition compulsion, right? And just to end off, not all relationships out there are unhealthy, right? There are a lot of relationships out there that are healthy. I've seen a lot of relationships that are exceedingly unhealthy. And I understand it's like, wow, you guys are just beating each other up for no reason, right? Maybe you're unaware of your own shit and you need to do some work to see that better, right? But that's the reality of it. There is long term risk to unhealthy repetition compulsion. Sustained stress leads to physical ailments in the body. That's just the reality of it.